I was date raped. I was a 21-year-old, and I was so ashamed that I wouldn't even contact my doctor, my gynecologist. I believed what many of you who may have been date raped or pressured into having sex believe. You brought it on yourself. I'm going to tell you right now, you are not guilty of date rape. Ever. You have the right to say no. I don't care what condition you're in, where you are, or to what point you undressed. You can say no. Welcome. I'm your life coach, Eileen Floyd. If you have never been date raped, if you have never been pushed sexually and pressured sexually by a boyfriend, even by a husband, if you've never had a husband push you to do things sexually that made you feel uncomfortable or ashamed, you might as well just skip this podcast. It's not really for you. But for those women who have been in any of those positions, who've had those experiences, I want to talk to you. I want to give you God's perspective on it. And I want you to know there's people out there who really, truly understand. I have heard horror stories as a minister of people who've come to the church I used to be in charge of in Delray for about 15 years. And they had sought marital counseling at their previous churches. Primarily, it would be the wife who would go, and she would want some kind of help because something in that marriage was making her miserable. And of course, the church, outside of saying abstinence is the answer to everything, and the wife must submit to her husband in all things, pretty much doesn't talk too much about sex. So I think I need to cover that deficit and also pull down some misinformation that has been given to some really good-hearted and well-intentioned believers. If any man or woman of God tells you, wives, that you must submit to your husband and whatever he wants to do sexually, even if it makes you feel degraded, even if you're sick, even if you're uncomfortable, even if you've had a really long, hard, exhausting day at work or with the kids, even if you're just plain not up for it, maybe you had a disagreement that morning and you still haven't come to a peace and prayed it through together. You do indeed have the godly right to say no. For those of you who are dating, who are single, no does mean no. But in a godly sense, let me add to that. Any man who would pressure you into having sexual intimacy with him without honoring you with his last name, a ring, and public declaration of covenant, he has totally disrespected you. He's not supporting your walk with God. He's pulling you away from your walk with God. And that is not a leader of the home whom you can trust, submit to, and rely on. If he's not helping you to be your best and walk your best way, get rid of him. There's plenty other fish in the sea that do love God and will respect and honor you. I know a lot of women also who are involved in what we will call the sex trade. And I know many women who've been date raped. I was date raped. The year was 1971. I was a 21-year-old, pretty hot looking, long blonde hair, skirts up to my hips. The hippie look, you got it. But I rocked it pretty well. And when I would get off work, I used to like to hang out in the nicer pubs in Georgetown up in Washington, D.C. And I developed a crush on a bartender there. And he seemed to really like me because I never got presented with a check for any of the drinks I guzzled down. And one night he said, "Would you like to hook up after work?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love that." Hooking up ended up him entering my home. We went downstairs to the family room. I thought maybe we'll neck and watch TV and then he'll go. It did not turn out that way. It turned out with me screaming for help, but my roommate wasn't home, pleading for him to stop because the pain was becoming unbearable. And when he finally dressed and walked out of my house, I was bleeding, I was badly injured, and I was so ashamed that I wouldn't even contact my doctor, my gynecologist. So it took a long time for me to heal, probably a couple of months. I had internal injuries. But the shame was so overwhelming because I believed what many of you who may have been date raped or pressured into having sex believe. You brought it on yourself. It was because you were so nice and you were so engaging and you gave him encouragement. It was the way you dressed. It was that, sexy smile you gave him when the toss of the hair. You are at fault. And God forbid, you may have mixed some liquor in there, so you weren't even working with a full deck. I'm going to tell you right now, you are not guilty of date rape, ever. You have the right to say, no, I don't care what condition you're in, where you are, or to what point you undressed. You can say no. And any man who doesn't honor that, he is a rapist. It's a crime. And it's a crime against God, too. God does not take nicely to it. There are a lot of penalties listed in Deuteronomy and in Malachi. In Deuteronomy, if a man raped a woman, he was taken outside and stoned to death under Mosaic law. Stoned to death. Not the woman. All she had to do was cry for help. And even if they were in a wilderness area where no one could hear her, they gave her the benefit of the doubt, unlike our courts today. And he would be taken outside and stoned to death for violating that woman. That's how strongly God takes it. And this even applies in a marriage. Because the Lord himself says how we're to treat our wives. In 1 Peter 3:7, he said you're supposed to treat your wife with tenderness. Well, violating her sexually when she's sick or ill or injured or exhausted, that's not treating her with tenderness, is it? And he says, so nothing will hinder your prayers. If you do not treat your wife with respect and tenderness in the sexual department, as well as the emotional department, guess who has cut you off from his favor, from hearing your prayers? He will not have your back in that next business crisis you're facing. Why? Because you need to make it right with your wife first for what you've done to wrong her and assault her dignity. And for those who are working in the sex trade, it's so easy in a patriarchal society to say, well, they're just, sluts. They're just this, they're just that. You know something? I have, as a life coach, never met anyone indulging in any activity that is considered either criminal or immoral or socially unacceptable who didn't get there because they have a story. We all have a story. And if God understands that, who are we, especially those of us in the church, to look down on or to judge anyone? Listen to their story and care about them, because it's the goodness of God. It's his love. It's his kindness that brings all of us to repentance and to that new life in him. And why do I share all this with you today? because you matter.
If you found our time together useful, please be sure to hit like and subscribe.